Ebony sits in the corner of the diner. She had been there since the sun risen. Her mind keep rushing back to what she's seen. She can't erase the horror. The lunchtime rush had entered without her noticing. She heard a deep voice asking, "Can I have a seat?" "Miss," he called out. She looked up at him. "Yes. Can I help you?" He immediately noticed her bloodshot eyes. "Can I have a seat? Promise I won't bother you, just need to eat and do some work on my laptop." She shook her head yes, and turned back to the window, looking lost. When she turned back around after a long while, he was still there, working on his computer. The place was quiet, the lunch rush was over. Ebony's fingers idly traced the rim of her coffee cup, the once steaming drink now cold and bitter. She kept her gaze fixed on the streaked glass window, watching cars crawl past like slow-moving shadows. The man who had asked to sit was still there, his tall frame slightly hunched over a sleek black laptop. His fingers moved with practiced speed, but every now and then she felt his eyes flicker toward her, quick, assessing glances that made her stomach tighten. She hadn't planned on staying this long. The sun was high now, its sharp light spilling through the blinds and slicing the table in narrow stripes. She should leave. She should go anywhere but here. But her legs wouldn't move, as if some invisible weight anchored her to the cracked vinyl seat. "Refill?" The waitress, a tired woman with a messy bun and a faded name tag that read Marta, held the coffee pot like it was part of her arm. Ebony forced a small smile. "Sure." Marta poured, her eyes darting between Ebony and the man with the laptop. "You been here since dawn, honey. Everything all right?" Ebony's lips parted, but no words came. She shook her head faintly, her throat too tight for answers. The man's voice broke in, steady, low, with a kind of unforced calm. "If it helps," he said, without looking up from his screen, "you don't have to answer that." Ebony blinked at him. "Excuse me?" He finally glanced up. His eyes were warm, the kind that searched but didn't pry. "Some people ask because they want to know. Some people ask because they care. I'm guessing you've had enough of the first kind." Her fingers stilled around the coffee cup. "And which kind are you?" He tilted his head, considering. "The second, most days." There was something in the way he said it, half honest, half guarded, that made her curiosity stir against her better judgment. "I'm Caleb," he offered, closing his laptop halfway. "And you look like someone who hasn't eaten since yesterday." Ebony's stomach betrayed her with a low growl. She glanced away, embarrassed. "I'm fine." "Right," he said lightly. But his gaze didn't waver. "You want company for lunch? No strings, no questions." She hesitated, the memory of what she had seen still clawing at the edges of her mind. And yet, the idea of sitting in silence with someone who wasn't demanding answers felt strangely safe. "Maybe," she murmured, her voice so soft it nearly disappeared between them. Caleb nodded once, as though sealing an unspoken agreement. "Then I'll order us something." "So, I'm guessing, man problems?" Caleb said, leaning back in his seat. His tone was light, but his eyes watched her closely. Ebony arched a brow at him. "Including my best friend," she replied, her voice edged with bitterness. His eyebrow lifted higher. "Your best friend?" Ebony gave a short laugh. But it was hollow, the kind of laugh that comes just before tears. "I'm crying for the loss of my best friend. My so-called boyfriend? That was a joke. Losing him was nothing to me. I could have handled him being with another woman, believe me. But my best friend?" She shook her head. "That's a whole different kind of pain." Caleb rested his forearms on the table, his expression open, inviting her to keep going. "I kept Peter around," she continued, "because he knew how to make me laugh. He could brighten my day when I didn't even realize I needed it. But he had no work ethic. Super lazy, couldn't keep a job longer than a few weeks. Drove me crazy. Him I can replace in a heartbeat. But a best friend?" Her voice cracked slightly. "That's much harder to find." Caleb studied her for a moment, then said softly, "And now that you've spent the day grieving, do you feel better?" Ebony gave a sharp laugh. "Nope, not even close." He smirked faintly. "Why are you hiding out here?" Her head snapped toward him. "Who said I'm hiding?" Your body language, he said simply. The way you're sitting tucked into the corner, the window seat with the best view of the door. And that suit you're wearing, it screams corporate America. And corporate America doesn't usually spend half a day in a diner with cold coffee. A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. Guilty. I was an executive assistant. My boss was a good man. Smart, fair, made the office feel like family. But the board pushed him out and replaced him with someone else. She let out a slow breath. Now I'm jobless. Caleb tilted his head. Are you in a hurry to go back? I was, she said, fiddling with her coffee spoon, until I walked in on them yesterday. His brow furrowed. Then? Peter and my best friend. Her jaw tightened. Laughing like nothing in the world could touch them, and not the we're just catching up kind of laughing. The kind where you know you've been replaced. And for a moment, I thought, maybe I'll just leave this whole concrete palace behind and find something smaller, quieter. Caleb sat back, watching her with a look that was part curiosity, part recognition. That doesn't sound like running away. That sounds like rethinking your whole life. She gave him a side glance. You a life coach or something? No, he said, with a chuckle. I work in corporate America too, just a different corner of it. Figures, she said, eyeing his perfectly pressed shirt and polished watch. That suit screams money. He grinned. And you're saying yours doesn't? She smirked, but didn't answer. Instead, she took a slow sip of coffee and said, So what is it you actually do? I negotiate contracts, he replied, his voice calm but clipped in a way that suggested he was used to guarding details. Mostly mergers and acquisitions. Ebony's eyes narrowed slightly. You sound like the guy who walks into a meeting and leaves with everyone's lunch money. Caleb laughed. Only on Mondays. Something about the ease in his voice made her relax, just a little. She realized she hadn't had a conversation like this in months. No expectations, no performance. Just words tossed across a table like coins in a fountain. He glanced at his watch, then reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a crisp, cream-colored business card. If you decide to hang around, he said, sliding it toward her, call me in a couple of weeks. I know people who know people, might help you find something new, or at least point you toward a better cup of coffee. She hesitated, staring at the card before picking it up. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. Thanks. Caleb smiled, but didn't push. Nice to meet you, Ebony. She exhaled, her fingers curling around the card. It's time for me to go home and burn everything that belongs to them. Caleb's laugh was low and genuine. Just make sure you do it outside. Less chance of setting off the smoke alarm. Ebony stood, slipping the card into her bag. As she walked toward the door, she felt his eyes follow her. Not in a way that made her uneasy, but in a way that made her wonder. She didn't know if she'd call him, but she knew she wasn't quite as alone as she'd been when the sun first came up. The ride to her mother's small, cozy home was quiet except for the occasional hum of the old sedan. Ebony had left the city in a daze, needing space from the betrayal, the noise, and the endless glass towers that felt more like cages than opportunities. Her mom was waiting on the porch when she pulled in, arms crossed but a soft smile on her face. You look like someone who's been wrestling with a decision. Ebony stepped out of the car and slumped into her mother's familiar embrace. It's like I'm stuck between staying and running. Her mom guided her inside, the smell of cornbread and roasted chicken filling the kitchen. Then maybe it's not about staying or running, she said, setting 2 months of tea on the table. Maybe it's about choosing what's worth your peace. Ebony sat, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Peace feels expensive right now. Baby, her mom said with a knowing look, so is staying in the wrong place. They talked late into the night. About Peter, about the friend who'd stabbed her in the back, about the job she no longer had. By morning, the decision had settled in Ebony's gut. She wasn't done with the city yet. She was just done with them. Her mind went to the business card in her bag. Caleb, the man with the suit, the calm voice, and the curious eyes. She pulled out her phone and hit the number before she could overthink it. Caleb, his smooth voice answered on the second ring. Hi, Caleb. This is Ebony, she said, feeling both nervous and amused at herself. I need to know more about that job offer. He didn't hesitate. The description's unconventional, he warned. Try me. You'll be hired as my girlfriend. Ebony blinked, then laughed. You want me to date you in public? Exactly, he said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. I want you to be my eyes and ears in public. Company events, social gatherings, dinners, places where people are more likely to overlook someone standing next to me. She leaned back in her chair. So, you want me to spy on the enemy? Exactly, he said, completely unbothered. While they're overlooking you, you'll be gathering information, quietly, accurately, then reporting back to me. Ebony shook her head, grinning despite herself. You're serious about this? Dead serious. And what's the cost? She asked, expecting him to name something laughable. $80,000 a year. Ebony's jaw dropped. She covered the mouthpiece and yelled, Mom, I'm going back. From the kitchen, her mother's voice rang out. Don't forget to pack a coat. Caleb laughed from the other end, a warm, genuine sound. I'll have a contract drawn up and ready when you return. She hung up, a strange mix of excitement and uncertainty fluttering in her chest. One thing was certain, this was going to be nothing like her last job. Ebony adjusted the hem of her red dress in the hotel's gilded mirror, the deep crimson fabric hugging her curves perfectly. She had chosen it deliberately, bold enough to draw eyes, classic enough to be untouchable. Her hair was swept up in a sleek twist, a few tendrils framing her face, and the diamond studs Caleb had sent over sparkled under the chandelier's glow. When she stepped into the ballroom on Caleb's arm, the hum of conversation seemed to shift. Heads turned, eyes lingered, and then came the looks, those sharp, assessing stares from women dressed in couture, their manicured fingers curling around champagne flutes. Some gave tight, polite smiles. Others didn't bother hiding their disdain. She's not one of us. What's he doing with her? Can't possibly last. Ebony could practically hear the thoughts rattling in their perfectly coiffed heads. But she didn't flinch. If anything, the corner of her mouth curved into the faintest, most knowing smirk. Caleb leaned down just enough for only her to hear. You're enjoying this way too much. Isn't that the job? She murmured, keeping her eyes forward. Keep them looking and wondering. He chuckled softly. You're a natural. Throughout the night, Ebony played her role to perfection. She laughed at Caleb's subtle jokes, touched his arm at the right moments, and leaned in just close enough to give the impression of intimacy. But she also scanned the room, memorizing faces, noting who spoke to whom, watching the subtle exchanges that others might miss. She caught one particularly bold woman draped in emerald silk, glaring openly at her from across the table. Instead of looking away, Ebony held her gaze, then slipped her hand into Caleb's and laced their fingers together. The woman's lips tightened. Ebony's smile widened. Later, while Caleb was pulled into a conversation with two board members, Ebony drifted toward the refreshment table, her ears tuned to the snippets of gossip floating around her. Her presence was like a magnet. People either gravitated toward her out of curiosity or tried to pull each other away from her as if she were dangerous, and in a way, she was. When Caleb rejoined her, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes, he whispered, You've got them exactly where I want them. Ebony tilted her head, feigning innocence. Oh? And where's that? Watching you. While you're watching them, he replied, his voice low and approving. For the first time in weeks, Ebony felt more than just useful. She felt powerful. As the evening wound down, the music softened, and clusters of guests migrated toward the far corners of the ballroom, their voices dropping into low, conspiratorial tones. Ebony lingered near the marble archway leading to the terrace, sipping sparkling water, her eyes sweeping the room like she was born to be there. That's when she heard it. Two men. One she recognized instantly as Martin Caldwell, a senior member of Caleb's board, stood just beyond the open terrace doors. Their voices were low, but years of navigating office politics had trained Ebony's ear to pick out useful threads in a sea of noise. Quote, Vote against it quietly. He won't see it coming, Martin was saying, his tone laced with smug confidence. The other man chuckled. And once it falls through, his shares will take a hit. Easy pickings. Ebony's heart thudded. She didn't know the full scope of it, but she knew the tone of someone planning a coup when she heard one. She kept her back to them, pretending to study the flower arrangements, then slipped back into the crowd before they noticed her. When Caleb finally found her near the coat check, his tie slightly loosened, she leaned in close, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to talk, privately." His brows knit. "What happened?" She didn't speak until they were outside under the awning, away from the stream of departing guests. "One of your board members, Martin Caldwell, was just on the terrace. He was talking to some guy I didn't recognize. Said he plans to vote against it quietly, and that once it falls through, your shares would take a hit. Then he called it easy pickings." Caleb's jaw tightened, his usual smooth composure cracking just enough for her to see the sharp edge beneath. "You're sure?" She gave him a look. "I didn't take this job to make things up. I'm sure." He studied her for a moment, as if weighing how much trust she'd earned in such a short time. Then he exhaled slowly. "If you weren't here tonight," he shook his head. "This could have blindsided me." Ebony shrugged, trying to downplay it even as a thrill ran through her. "Guess that makes me worth the 80 grand. That made him laugh. A short, real laugh. But his eyes were still calculating. "It makes you worth more than that. And now, I have to decide how to deal with Caldwell, without showing my hand." She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice. "Maybe you don't have to deal with him just yet. Let him think you don't know. Use me again." Caleb's gaze sharpened. And for a beat, the air between them was charged with something that was both business and not. "I think," he said slowly, "you might be the best investment I've made in years." The next week, Caleb invited Ebony to a smaller, invitation-only dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't the kind of loud, glittering gala they had attended before. This was more intimate, more strategic. Just a handful of board members, a few high-profile investors, and Caldwell. Ebony could feel his eyes on her the moment she entered, her arm tucked in Caleb's. Martin Caldwell was the type of man who thought he'd already read the last page of every book in the room. His smirk told her exactly what he thought of her. An attractive accessory, nothing more. Caleb played his part well, greeting Caldwell warmly and introducing Ebony as though she were just there for the champagne and company. She smiled sweetly, even leaned in when Caldwell kissed her hand in that old-fashioned, patronizing way. "Caleb," Caldwell said, with a sly glance at her, "I see you found a distraction. Much better than staring at spreadsheets all night, eh?" Ebony's laugh was soft, effortless. "Oh, I do enjoy keeping him from working too much." She tilted her head like she was letting him in on a harmless secret. Caleb chuckled along, but under the table, his hand brushed her knee, just enough for her to know he was signaling, "Keep going." As the dinner moved on, Caldwell relaxed, clearly believing she was nothing but a pretty face. He leaned toward her several times, telling harmless industry anecdotes that slowly bled into bits of strategy talk. He was so busy trying to impress her with his insider knowledge that he didn't seem to notice her casual, almost accidental questions steering him toward specifics. "And Caleb's latest project?" she asked innocently, swirling her wine. "It sounds so exciting. I can barely keep up with all the deals he's juggling." Caldwell smirked. "Well, between us," he said, lowering his voice just enough to make it sound conspiratorial, "he won't be juggling much longer. A few of us have a better plan. He doesn't even realize he's walking right into it." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Oh, but wouldn't that be risky?" "Not for me," Caldwell said with a laugh, sipping his brandy. "Sometimes the best way to win is to let the other guy think he's ahead. Caleb's sharp, but he's distracted these days. Work's in my advantage." His gaze flicked down her dress before returning to her face. "Guess I have you to thank for that." Ebony's smile never wavered, though inside, The comment made her want to pour her wine in his lap. She let her eyes sparkle as if flattered, then redirected the conversation, storing every word away. When they left the restaurant, Caleb's hand lingered at her back. "You got him talking," he murmured once they were out of earshot. She grinned. "He thinks I'm the distraction. Let's keep it that way." Caleb's lips curved into a slow, approving smile. "Remind me to give you a raise." Saturday afternoon, the high-end shopping district was buzzing. Boutiques lined the cobblestone street, and the steady hum of conversation was broken only by the occasional laugh or clink of coffee cups. Caleb had chosen the spot deliberately. It was where his crowd shopped: investor wives, board members' girlfriends, and socialites who traded gossip like currency. When he stepped out of his sleek black car, Ebony on his arm in a cream wrap dress and gold heels, heads turned instantly. Caleb didn't rush her. Instead, he slowed his pace, guiding her toward one of the most exclusive jewelry stores in the city. The store's glass door reflected the curious stares of two women seated at the cafe across the street, women Ebony recognized from the gala. Inside, a sales associate nearly tripped over himself, greeting them. Caleb gestured toward the display cases with a confident, "Whatever she likes, bring it out." Ebony's lips curved. She knew exactly what he was doing, letting this scene play out for the benefit of anyone who might be watching. And she was more than happy to give them a show. She leaned in close to him as they looked over a tray of diamond bracelets, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "This one's beautiful," she murmured, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Caleb's eyes softened, just enough for her to see the amusement there. "Then we'll take it." The sales associate beamed, slipping it into a velvet box. When they stepped outside again, the bracelet glittering on her wrist, Ebony made sure her laugh rang clear as she touched his arm. "You're spoiling me." Caleb, catching sight of a small group of well-dressed women lingering nearby, slid his hand to her waist and kissed her temple. "You're worth it." The women's faces flickered with barely concealed shock and disapproval. Ebony, catching their gaze, smiled sweetly before looping her arms around Caleb's neck. "I love you," she said, letting the words land just loud enough for the onlookers to hear. Caleb's answering smile wasn't the polished corporate one. This one was real, almost boyish. He pulled her closer, pressing a quick kiss to her lips. "Good," he said softly, his voice warm, "because I'm starting to like the way this feels." As they walked toward the next store, she caught the whisper starting behind them. Women turning to one another, eyebrows raised, speculation already spinning. Exactly as Caleb had planned, and exactly how Ebony wanted it. The invitation came wrapped in a pale pink envelope, sealed with a gold crest. Caleb had smirked when he saw it. "Careful," he warned, handing it to her. "They're not inviting you because they like you." Ebony opened it, scanning the ornate script. "Ladies' luncheon, hosted by the Wyndham Circle." She didn't need Caleb to explain. She could already smell the condescension behind the pastel invitations. This was a test, an intimidation game. Perfect. By the time the luncheon rolled around, Ebony had already built her armor. A carefully curated fake online profile, complete with elegant vacation shots, charity gala appearances, and a wellness blog website that positioned her as an influencer who dabbled in light consulting. The truth, that she held a master's in business and economics, was locked away where they'd never think to look. The restaurant's private room was dripping in crystal light fixtures and faux warmth. As Ebony entered in a slate blue sheath dress and soft pearl earrings, conversation slowed. The hostess, a woman in her late 40s with an ageless blowout air, kissed her cheeks and gestured to the far end of the table. The lunch began pleasantly enough. Compliments on her dress, probing questions about how she met Caleb, and passive-aggressive praise for how well she's adjusting to his world. Then the conversation turned to market economics. Ebony could see it in their eyes. They thought they were talking over her head, throwing around terms and speculation as though she were just window dressing. So she smiled, sipped her champagne, and let them believe it. That's when she heard the first breadcrumb. Well, Caldwell's position will be much stronger if the acquisition fails. One woman in a cream silk blouse said casually. Especially since he's got Bennett's backing now. Another laughed. Oh, Bennett will always back him. They've been close for years. Let's just say their vacations aren't always for family. Ebony's pulse quickened, though her expression remained serene. She made a mental note. Bennett was on the board too. This was more than a casual alliance. It sounded personal. As they continued to talk, she dropped the occasional soft question, never revealing she knew exactly what EBITDA was or how leveraged buyouts worked. The women happily filled in the blanks, convinced they were educating her while, in reality, she was gathering a blueprint of Caldwell's inner circle. By dessert, Ebony had mapped 3 key players who were quietly aligned against Caleb, plus a timeline of when certain votes might take place. When she stood to leave, she thanked them sweetly for being so patient in explaining things, and promised to look up those terms when she got home. The hostess beamed, clearly convinced Ebony was harmless. Back in Caleb's car, she handed him a folded napkin covered in neat, tiny notes. You learned all this in 2 hours? He asked, scanning the names and connections she'd written down. Ebony smiled, fastening her seatbelt. They thought they were teaching me how the market works. They were really teaching me how they work. Caleb glanced over at her, the corner of his mouth curling upward. Remind me never to underestimate you. You never have, she said, her voice low but certain. The evening was supposed to be another strategic appearance. Dinner at an exclusive rooftop restaurant, followed by a charity gala at the Grand Regent. Caleb had framed it as good optics, but Ebony knew it was also another chance to keep tongues wagging and eyes on them instead of on his business maneuvers. She wore a black satin gown with a low back and a slit that moved like liquid when she walked. Caleb's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer than usual when she stepped out of the car, and she caught the faintest twitch of a smile before he offered his arm. The gala's ballroom glimmered with gold chandeliers and polished marble floors. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the band's smooth jazz filled the air. Caleb guided her toward the dance floor after dinner, saying just loud enough for her to hear, "People expect us to look like we actually enjoy each other." "I think I can manage that," Ebony teased, resting her hand on his shoulder. They moved easily together, her head tilted slightly toward him. What started as practice steps for the benefit of onlookers shifted into something slower, more deliberate. His hand at her waist was firm but warm, his touch almost protective. The world around them seemed to soften. Whispers faded, the music smoothed into a low hum, and for a moment, it felt less like an act and more like them. "You're a dangerous woman, Ebony," he murmured. "Dangerous?" she asked, arching a brow. "You make me forget this is a performance." His eyes held hers, unblinking. Before she could reply, a tall man in an expensive suit approached, his smile just a shade too wide. Richard Hawthorne, one of Caleb's investors. Ebony recognized him from the files she'd skimmed. He was known in their circle for being too friendly with other men's dates, and sometimes wives. "Caleb," Richard said, clasping his shoulder before turning his attention fully on Ebony. "And you must be the lovely Ebony I've been hearing about." He took her hand and held it a little too long, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Caleb's smile never faltered, but his hand shifted at her waist, pulling her subtly closer. "Careful, Richard," he said lightly, but there was an edge beneath the charm. "She's not just here to look pretty. She's with me." Richard chuckled, as though it were a joke, but his eyes flicked between them, reading the tension. Of course," he said, releasing her hand. "Enjoy your evening." As Richard moved off, Ebony looked up at Caleb. "That was a warning." "That was me being polite," he corrected, his tone low. "The next one won't be." Her lips curved into a slow smile. "I think I'm starting to enjoy this role." Caleb's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he drew her back into the dance, holding her closer this time, not for show, but because he wanted to. The city glittered beneath them, as Caleb's driver wound through quiet streets toward his penthouse. After the gala, neither of them had seemed eager to say goodnight. When Caleb suggested a nightcap at his place, Ebony had agreed without hesitation. Inside, the space was warm and minimal, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, soft lighting casting a golden glow across the dark wood floors. Caleb shrugged out of his jacket and loosened his tie. Ebony kicked off her heels, curling her toes into the thick rug with a sigh. "Better?" he asked, watching her as he poured 2 glasses of wine. "Much," she said, sinking into the plush sectional. "I think those shoes were designed by someone who hates women." He laughed, handing her a glass before settling beside her. "So," he said, tilting his head, "we've done the public show? Tonight no roles, just you and me." She arched a brow. "No audience? You sure you can handle that?" "Try me." They started with safe topics, her hometown, the weather, travel dreams. But soon the conversation deepened. Caleb told her about growing up as the oldest of 3 in a small coastal town, how his father ran a hardware store and his mother taught high school English. He'd put himself through college on a mix of scholarships and side hustles, and he still remembered the thrill of signing his first big deal. Ebony shared pieces of her own story. She'd grown up in a bustling city apartment with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. Her mother had taught her resilience early, and Ebony had carried that into her years at college, where she'd studied business and economics. Though she skipped over that part, just as she had with the women at the luncheon. They traded stories about bad relationships, each tale met with laughter or sympathetic groans. Caleb confessed to dating someone in his early 20s who'd only been interested in his connections. Ebony admitted she'd stayed with Peter longer than she should have because he was fun in small doses. "You deserve better than small doses," Caleb said quietly, swirling the wine in his glass. Her gaze lingered on him for a beat longer than necessary. "So do you." The conversation drifted into the easy territory of favorite foods, college pranks, and the kind of music they'd loved as teenagers. At some point, Caleb put on a playlist, soft, slow tracks that hummed in the background, and they shifted closer, legs brushing, shoulders touching. They didn't notice when the wine glasses sat forgotten on the table, or when the laughter gave way to comfortable silence. Ebony tucked her legs under her and leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "You know," she murmured, her voice drowsy, "for a fake boyfriend, you're not bad company." Caleb smiled, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "And for someone who's supposedly just a distraction, you're complicated." Her soft laugh vibrated against him. "I'll take that as a compliment." They didn't mean to fall asleep, but the warmth of the wine, the steady rhythm of their breathing, and the rare safety of the moment pulled them under. When Caleb woke the next morning, the city was washed in pale gold light. He was still on the sofa, his neck stiff, but he barely noticed. Ebony was curled against him, one hand tucked under her cheek, her hair spilling softly across his arm. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just watched her. The rise and fall of her breathing, the way her lashes fanned across her cheeks, the faint trace of last night's laughter lingering in the corners of her mouth. It struck him, unexpectedly, sharply, that she was beautiful in a way no staged appearance could capture. Not the red carpet beauty he'd paraded for the benefit of others, but something quieter, something real. He found himself wondering what she'd dreamt about, whether she'd dreamed at all. When she stirred, her brow creasing slightly before her eyes fluttered open, he smiled down at her. "Morning." Her voice was rough with sleep. "Did we fall asleep here?" "Apparently," he said, glancing at the untouched guest bedroom down the hall. She sat up slowly, running a hand through her hair. "Guess we're not very good at keeping the lines between work and personal life." His gaze didn't leave hers. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, curiosity, maybe even the beginnings of something neither of them had planned for. Whatever it was, Caleb knew he wasn't ready to let it go. The kitchen in Caleb's penthouse felt worlds away from the glittering galas and tense business dinners. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, bouncing off the sleek marble countertops. Ebony sat at the island, wearing one of his crisp white shirts over her dress from last night. The sleeves rolled halfway up her arms. Caleb moved around the kitchen with surprising ease for someone whose life seemed too busy for domestic moments. He poured coffee into 2 mugs, slid one in front of her, and set a plate of toast and fresh berries between them. "You cook too?" she teased, picking up a slice of toast. "Don't tell my investors," he said, smirking. "They like to think I survive on overpriced takeout and ambition." She laughed, sipping her coffee. "So what else don't they know about you?" He leaned on the counter, his eyes warm in the morning light. "Plenty, but that works both ways, doesn't it?" Her lips curved. "Touché." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, their conversation dipping into light topics, travel plans, books they'd meant to read, the absurd price of the toast she was holding if it were sold in one of the hotel cafes he frequented. It felt natural, easy, dangerously so. Then Caleb's phone rang. The ringtone was short, sharp. "Business." He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to take this." He stepped a few paces away, voice low but tight. Ebony caught fragments, words like vote, Bennett, and timeline moved up. Her stomach tightened. She didn't need the whole conversation to know this was about Caldwell. When he hung up, he didn't return to his coffee. He stood at the counter for a moment, jaw set, as if running calculations in his head. "Let me guess," she said, setting her mug down. "Caldwell's making a move sooner than you thought." He met her gaze. "The vote on the acquisition, it's been rescheduled for next week. Bennett's pushing for it." "Which means Caldwell thinks he already has the numbers," she said, thinking aloud. Caleb gave a short nod. "Exactly. If it passes against me, I lose control of a critical piece of my portfolio. And once I lose that, others start circling," she finished. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then she straightened in her seat, brushing imaginary crumbs from her lap. "Then we don't have much time." His brow lifted. "We?" She stood, crossing to him until they were only a foot apart. "You hired me to be your eyes and ears. That job doesn't end because we had a nice night." A small, reluctant smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. It was more than nice. Her expression softened for a moment before the steel returned to her eyes. "Then let's make sure Caldwell never gets the chance to celebrate." Caleb's gaze lingered on her, as though he was seeing both the woman in his shirt and the strategist behind the role. "I'll set up a meeting with one of our contacts. Someone who can get us closer to Bennett's inner circle without tipping our hand." She tilted her head. "You mean someone who'll underestimate me the same way the rest of them do?" "That's exactly what I mean." He picked up his phone again, scrolling through contacts. "Get dressed, we're going hunting." Ebony smiled, the thrill of the game igniting in her chest. "Now that's a breakfast plan I can get behind." By noon, they were pulling up to an elegant but discreet members-only club tucked between 2 glass office towers. The kind of place where money didn't just talk, it whispered in the right ears. Caleb was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his tie perfectly knotted. Ebony, now in a fitted emerald green dress with understated gold jewelry, looked like the picture of polished wealth. If anyone here underestimated her, it would be by design. Their contact, Victor Castle, was already waiting in a private corner of the lounge. A silver-haired man in his late 60s with the posture of a retired general. Victor had been in Caleb's world long enough to know where the cracks were. "Caleb," Victor greeted, shaking his hand before turning to Ebony. "And this must be the lady I've been hearing about." Ebony offered a warm smile, her handshake firm but graceful. "All good things, I hope." Victor chuckled, gesturing for them to sit. "Mostly curiosity. Now, Caleb tells me you're looking for an introduction to Bennett." "Not just an introduction," Ebony said smoothly, crossing her legs. "I want to explore opportunities, discreetly." Victor raised a brow. "Opportunities?" "Financial ones," she clarified, letting her tone suggest more than she said. Bennett's name keeps coming up in my circles, and people say he's visionary. Caleb sipped his drink, letting her take the lead as planned. Victor leaned back, studying her. Bennett doesn't entertain strangers without a reason. Ebony tilted her head. Then I'll give him one. I have capital. I'm selective. And I'm curious about ventures that aren't on the public books. Victor's lips curved slightly. You know how to get a man's attention. I've been told, she replied lightly, before leaning in just enough to lower her voice. Between us, I prefer dealing with people who have an edge. Bennett's name comes up whenever people talk about playing the long game, and I like the long game. Caleb hid his satisfaction behind another drink. She was threading the needle perfectly, intriguing enough to get an invite, vague enough not to reveal her hand. Victor chuckled again. You might just be his type. I'll see what I can do, but you should know, Bennett's loyal. If he's with Caldwell, he'll stay there until he sees no advantage in it. That's fine, Ebony said with a serene smile. Sometimes you don't have to move the king to win the game. You just take the right pieces off the board. Victor's eyes sharpened, but he nodded slowly. I'll set a meeting. Just remember, Bennett likes to test people. I like to pass tests, she replied. When they left the club, Caleb held the door open for her, waiting until they were back in the car before speaking. You played that perfectly. Ebony glanced out the window, hiding her grin. If Bennett's loyal to Caldwell, then I need to see how far that loyalty goes, and what it would take to break it. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You're starting to think like me. She turned back to him, her expression cool, but her eyes bright. Maybe. Or maybe you're starting to think like me. 2 nights later, Victor came through. The meeting with Bennett was set for a private dining room in an exclusive art gallery. One of those events that looked like a charity function, but was really just an excuse for wealthy people to make deals over $2,000 bottles of wine. Ebony arrived alone, dressed in a sleek navy dress that managed to be both modest and devastating, paired with a strand of pearls. Caleb had insisted she go without him. He needs to believe you're here for your own reasons, he'd said. If he thinks I sent you, he'll shut down. Victor met her at the entrance and escorted her through the main gallery, where guests in designer suits and gowns milled around, pretending to care about the art. The private room was at the back, guarded by a man in a perfectly fitted black suit. Inside, Bennett sat at the head of a long mahogany table, his silver hair slicked back, a glass of whiskey in hand. His smile was warm but calculated, the kind of expression that never reached the eyes. Miss Ebony, he said, rising to shake her hand. Victor speaks highly of you. I hope he didn't exaggerate, she replied smoothly, taking the seat he indicated. The conversation started lightly. Travel, mutual acquaintances, wine preferences. But Bennett's eyes never stopped evaluating her. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Tell me, he said, why is a woman like you interested in someone like me? She let a pause stretch just long enough to suggest she was weighing her words. Because I've learned that true influence isn't in the board minutes or the press releases. It's in the conversations people think no one's listening to. And you, Mr. Bennett, are always in those conversations. His smile deepened a fraction. Flattery is cheap, Miss Ebony. Insight, now that's valuable. Then here's some insight, she said, tilting her head. Men like Caldwell, she deliberately didn't say Caleb's name, win by removing obstacles. Men like you win by placing them exactly where you want them. Bennett chuckled, swirling his whiskey. You're not wrong. And if you were in my position, how would you deal with a partner who's starting to overplay his hand? Ebony met his gaze without flinching. I'd let him think he's winning, until he's so far over the line he can't come back. Then I'd make my move. His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of approval in them. Interesting answer. The waiter entered briefly to refill drinks, and when he left, Bennett leaned back. Since you're so observant, let me test you. There's a vote next week, big one. Do you know who's going to swing it? Ebony didn't hesitate. Someone you've already made a deal with. Bennett's smile was sharp. True, but the real play isn't the vote, it's the market hit that comes right after. Caldwell won't see it until it's too late. And just like that, she had it. The vote was a setup for a stock play. Bennett and Caldwell planned to tank the value of a key asset, buy it back cheap, and cut Caleb out entirely. She sipped her wine, her expression unreadable. Sounds profitable. It will be, Bennett said with confidence. When they stood to leave, Bennett kissed her hand lightly. You've passed my test, Miss Ebony. I think we'll see more of each other. Outside. She slipped into the car Caleb had sent, and finally exhaled. Caleb was waiting in the back seat. Well, he asked. She met his eyes. I know their play, and you're right, we don't have much time. The next morning, Caleb was different. There was no casual banter over coffee, no teasing smile when she caught his eye. He was quiet, focused in a way that made Ebony's stomach twist. By noon, she figured it out. He saw it in the way he took calls in another room, the sharp bursts of conversation she could just barely hear through the closed door. He was putting something in motion, something big, and he hadn't told her. When he finally emerged, dressed in his suit, phone in hand, she stepped into his path. You're shutting me out. This isn't your fight, Ebony, he said, trying to brush past her. She moved to block him again. The hell it isn't. We've been working this together from the start. His jaw tightened. No. I've been working this from the start. You've been helping, and now I'm taking the risk alone. Her hands curled into fists. Helping? Is that what you call it? You think I sat in rooms with those women for fun? You think I met Bennett just for the wine list? I've been in this with you, Caleb. We have been in this. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his voice softened. We're not partners, Ebony. You're more than that. Her breath caught. More? His gaze didn't waver. I couldn't take the chance of something happening to you. I've put everything in play to take Caldwell down, but you're staying out of it. Because if this goes wrong, I can survive losing the company. I couldn't survive losing you. The room seemed to still around them. I have fallen in love with you, he said quietly, as if saying it too loudly might shatter something fragile. Her vision blurred, but this broke something open inside her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm in love with you too. He stepped closer, his hand lifting to brush a tear away. Then you understand why I can't risk you. She shook her head, a watery smile breaking through. You don't get it. I don't care about the risk if it means standing with you. That's what love is, Caleb. You don't get to protect me from all of it. He exhaled slowly, his forehead resting against hers. You're impossible. And you're stubborn, she whispered back. His lips found hers then, slow, deep, and full of all the things they'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, the air between them felt different. They weren't just pretending anymore. They weren't just allies. They were something much more dangerous and much more real. Caleb's hands rested on her shoulders, his eyes steady, his voice calm but firm. Ebony, he said, listen to me. If anyone, even suspects you are part of this, we can't keep doing what we've been doing. The whole advantage of our arrangement is that they underestimate you. If they start seeing you as a player instead of a distraction, the spy game's over. Her lips parted to argue, but he squeezed her shoulders lightly, cutting her off. I know you want to help. I know you hate sitting on the sidelines. But this time, I need you here, safe. You're asking me to just sit here. I'm not asking, he said quietly, but his gaze softened. I'm reminding you, you're my partner, and if this works, there will be other plays. But if you step into the light now, it's over for both of us. She searched his face, looking for even a crack in his resolve. And if it doesn't work? His jaw tightened. Then you'll still be here when I come back. That's all I need to know. Something in his tone, the mixture of protectiveness and stubborn certainty, finally broke her resistance. She let out a frustrated sigh. Fine, but you call me the second it's over. I will. He brushed a hand down her arm, lingering for just a moment longer before stepping back. Lock the door. Stay out of sight. When the elevator doors closed on him, she stood in his apartment, staring at the skyline through the glass. She hated this. She hated not knowing. But more than that, she hated the thought of something happening to him. Across the city, Caleb walked into the board meeting like he owned the building, because, in more ways than one, he did. He'd spent the last 48 hours lining up allies, leaking strategic hints to the right journalists, and quietly acquiring just enough shares through third-party investors to swing the vote in his favor. Caldwell was already seated at the far end of the glossy mahogany table, a smug smile tugging at his lips. Bennett sat to his right, the picture of calm confidence. The meeting began with the vote on the acquisition. Caldwell's side spoke first, presenting a polished argument about reducing risk and maximizing return. Caleb let them finish without interruption. Then he stood, buttoning his jacket slowly. "My colleagues," he began, his tone measured, "what you've just heard is a proposal designed to limit growth under the guise of safety. What I'm offering is expansion, strategic, targeted expansion that secures our dominance for the next decade. And unlike Caldwell's plan, mine doesn't require selling out the very asset that makes us competitive." Caldwell's smirk faltered slightly. Caleb continued, clicking a remote to reveal charts. Charts that showed not only the strength of his strategy, but also, thanks to some carefully sourced data, hints of the damage Caldwell's plan would cause to shareholder value. When the vote was called, Caldwell leaned back with his arms crossed, confident. But as hands went up, his expression shifted. One by one, members he thought were loyal to him sided with Caleb. And then came the shock. Bennett, the supposed lock in Caldwell's corner, voted against him. The motion failed. Caleb's plan was approved. Caldwell's jaw clenched. Bennett simply nodded at Caleb, a faint smirk on his face. Whether it was admiration or calculation, Caleb couldn't tell. Ebony paced the living room, her phone clutched in her hand. Every passing minute stretched longer than the last. She'd tried reading, watching TV, even cleaning the already immaculate kitchen, but her mind kept drifting back to the boardroom, imagining every possible outcome. The click of the lock made her whirl around. Caleb stepped inside, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over one arm. "Well," she demanded, before he'd even closed the door. He dropped the jacket on the back of a chair, a slow smile breaking across his face. "We won." Her breath whooshed out in relief. Yes, Caldwell's plan failed. Mine passed. He's not out, but he's wounded, and he doesn't know how I pulled it off. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and threw her arms around him. He laughed, the tension in his body finally melting as he held her close. "You should have seen his face," Caleb murmured against her hair. Bennett flipped at the last minute. Ebony leaned back to look at him, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Guess all those conversations I had didn't hurt, huh?" His smile softened. "No, they didn't. But don't think I'm letting you walk into the line of fire next time." "Caleb?" He kissed her before she could finish, slow and certain. "You stayed. You trusted me. And now, we're ahead. That's what matters." She rested her forehead against his. "Just remember, next time, I'm in the room." He didn't answer right away, but the faint smirk on his lips told her the conversation wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Caleb's voice carried a different weight in the boardroom. "I want a full internal investigation," he announced, his tone sharp but calm. "Every board member's conduct, every financial tie, every conflicted interest. If you've got nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." No one dared argue. The process was slow and relentless. 6 months of digging, audits, interviews, private investigators, all handled quietly but with surgical precision. The pressure mounted until, one by one, cracks began to show. Eventually, 3 board members resigned under the guise of personal reasons, though everyone knew better. Caldwell survived the purge, but his influence was gutted. When the dust finally settled, Caleb came home one evening, looking lighter. The tension that had clung to him for months was gone. They were in his living room, wine glasses in hand, the city glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. When he finally said it, "I'm ready to move forward," he told her, leaning back against the couch. Ebony tilted her head. "With what?" "Our relationship." His mouth quirked into a faint smile. "No more pretending. No more fake girlfriend arrangement. I want to be with you, no games." Her brows lifted, a teasing glint in her eyes. "Do I get to stay on your payroll?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Yes. You're still responsible for spying for me. That's not negotiable." She smirked. "Well, you realize we could have been dating 6 months ago, right?" "I thought you needed time," he said, his voice softening. "You'd just gotten out of a relationship." Ebony rolled her eyes. "Someone who saw me as arm candy is not a relationship worth mourning. But you..." She reached over, brushing her fingers against his. "You're real, someone to build a future with." His gaze held hers. "Good. I'm taking your word as honest truth." They were visiting her mother's house for the weekend, enjoying the slower pace of her hometown. It was a warm evening, the air carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming to herself, while Ebony and Caleb sat on the back porch, sipping sweet tea. Caleb seemed distracted, his fingers drumming lightly against the arm of his chair. When Ebony finally asked if something was wrong, he stood, moving to stand in front of her. "Something's been on my mind for a while," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Her breath caught as he lowered himself onto one knee. "Ebony." His voice was steady, but his eyes were warm. "These last months with you have been more than I could have imagined. You've been my partner, my confidant, my sharpest ally, and the person I want beside me for the rest of my life." He opened the velvet box, revealing a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes blurred instantly with tears, and for a moment all she could do was nod. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through the tears. "Of course yes." Her mother peeked out from the kitchen door, just in time to see Caleb slip the ring onto her finger and pull her into a kiss. "You've got yourself a good one," her mother called out with a knowing smile. Caleb glanced over his shoulder, still holding Ebony close. "I know." And for the first time since all of this began, they both knew the pretending was over, not just in their relationship, but in the life they were building together. Hope you enjoyed this love story by Green Tea Tales. Please support our channel with comments, likes, and subscribe. Thank you.